What's up guys, this is Aiden. I've been producing dubstep for about a decade now, and it's one of the most difficult genres to learn because unlike most, you have to create all of the instruments that you're going to use. This means while most artists can just steal from random sample packs, we expect you as a dubstep producer to create all those sounds from scratch. So today I'm going to show you a little bit of sound design as we build a dubstep drop from start to finish. I hope this video is going to be useful for you. Let's get into the session. Got a blank FL Studio session. You can see me up here for my facial expressions. I'm looking good, you're looking good. Let's get started. We're going to start with a little bit of sound design to build our atmosphere for this drop. Dubstep is best written between the keys of D and F because that's where the bass hits the best. So I'm going to do everything in D sharp just because that's a key I can improvise well in, and it's also easy for me to teach you music theory in. This is the key that I have all of my clients that don't know music theory learn in when I'm mentoring them, and it allows them to learn things like creating amazing melodies and arps very efficiently. That's why in 2 seconds here, I can create an arp that sounds like this. And what we're doing is we're using the pentatonic scale, which has no dissonance, or none of these two notes right next to each other. If I play two notes that are right next to each other on the piano, it creates that dissonance. What we're doing in the pentatonic scale is removing all that dissonance, and as you see, we have these nice even spacing between all of our notes. Literally, this is the backbone for both the major and minor scale. So when I teach people music theory, it's very efficient because I'm using a scale where this pentatonic backbone for the minor and major scales is literally just the black keys, allowing for my clients to easily learn to improvise. Now for sound design, I want to have a sharp attack, so I want something to sound kind of percussive as if we're hitting a xylophone or a marimba, and I'm going to do that by adjusting my decay here and my sustain. I'm keeping things just within Serum 1, so it's very simple and there's not too many knobs or other stuff going on to confuse you guys. I'm also going to make sure that this pluck is loud, so we're going to have a very, very distorted sine wave, also known as a square wave. I'm just going to draw this in right here like this, and now our arp is going to sound like this. We're going to throw it up an octave because it's going to fill in some space in the higher registry, and then we're going to make sure that this little level here is a little bit sharper, and we're going to do that by moving this envelope over here just so the initial attack is a little bit quicker. Sounding good so far. I want this pluck to start an octave high and then drop an octave low, so I'm going to use the low frequency oscillator 1 and this little preset that I have here in order to make this pluck. By the way, this pluck is very similar to the plucks that I have in my sample pack. I've already made $5,000 off selling my sample pack, so I don't need to sell it anymore. If you want it for free, just DM me pack on Instagram and I will send it on over to you. It's got a lot of presets in it, literally for this kind of stuff. Let's get to adding some effects here. We're going to add a little bit of reverb. We're going to add some ping pong delay so things are a little bit more wide in the stereo. And then we're going to modulate the mix of our reverb in order for it to fill in some space and keep things interesting by moving it over time for the listener. That will sound like this. And then I noticed that that little octave movement needs to be quicker. Absolutely perfect start. For mixing, because this is dubstep, we're going to want everything to have a very strong sidechain to it. The sidechain is going to provide a little bit of a rhythm, but also give us differentiation between our kick and our sub. I'm going to name this mixer slot as ARP, and I'm going to give it a nice, strong high-pass filter because I don't want it to interact with anything else. There we go. Nice and sharp high pass. And then we can even give it a little bit of stereo width here in the mixer slot. Make sure when you're doing any kind of production, especially electronic music, you keep all of your levels down so you have plenty of headroom. Now, since this is being sent to track 3, this track is going to be our sidechain, and we're going to make track 1 and track 2 our kick drum and our snare drum. This is going to allow us to have a nice hard-hitting kick and snare, and everything is going to duck with those instruments. I'm going to do this automatically just by modulating the actual gain of this mixer slot, but there's lots of ways we can do sidechain, including things like a ring mod sidechain where we're being extremely intentional with our ducking. But in this case, we're going to have everything duck on the 1 and on the 3. And then as we program out our drums, which will be the next step here, we're going to make sure that those drums are always hitting in that 1 and that 3, which will give us that head banging feeling. And then we'll be doing some other stuff in terms of drum fills that we'll have to adjust the sidechain for. So without further ado, the easiest way to produce is to make sure you have the best samples and save them into a folder of your own that fits your style and your vision as an artist. So I have the most perfect kick drum, and then I have saved in my own folder for my artist account, Deceptive Reality, which don't forget to go give me a follow over there as well and show some love. I have the world's greatest snare drum, which has already been processed the exact way I want it. Actually, we're going to use the second snare drum. Kick on track 1, snare on track 2 makes mixing super easy. You'll notice this little sidechain knob is going to go wheat, wheat, wheat every time those kick drums and those snare drums are going to hit, providing space for all of our bass and other elements. And I need a saw stab. We're going to make this classic bro step. If you want a really powerful super saw, again, please just DM me pack on my Instagram and I'll send you my sample pack. This is a modification of the one and only AU5 super saw, but with a little bit of vibrato added and some more macro controls for different things in terms of hover articulations. And this is the most powerful super saw I've ever seen created. And that's saying a lot because I've been in this game for a while. I'm going to create a minor chord. On the 1, we're going to throw the 3rd up an octave, and then I'm going to duplicate down the root 2 octaves in 2 different layers, creating a nice powerful chord stack like this. And then we're going to throw it up an octave, and that one will sound nice and short like this. So I want people to really be focusing on the 1 or on the root of our scale. I think I'm going to throw another layer at the very top of this chord, right there. And since the way that things stack throughout the harmonic series leads to closer and closer intervals the higher up we go in the frequency spectrum, I could also add some more notes throughout the pentatonic scale in here to give it a little bit more color. Nice and euphoric. Love it. I'm going to take this exact same chord and we're going to have it play every, I guess, 2 bars. And then I want to make sure that we're leading into those downbeats. So I want to make a duplicate of the chord, bring it down a little bit, and then we're going to make sure that the major 3rd is going to become a minor 3rd. And it's a little bit difficult to see where that is right here. So we're going to make sure that's the major, which it is. All the chords will be major except for our root. And now this is going to sound just like this. And then I think for the loop, we're going to have it go bum, 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 which is really easy to do because we're just working with major chords here. So we're going to just bring this up a little bit. And now if I loop what we have so far, and we adjust a little bit of these levels by sending the super saw to a mixer track and sending that through the sidechain, you'll notice things are going to start sounding pretty good already. Now let's throw in a crash loop just to give this beat a little bit more rhythm, and we could even throw in a hi-hat too. Luckily, because I have things saved to sample packs and I reuse the best of everything, it's pretty easy for me to just find the right sounds for exactly what I'm doing. Now, if we were building out a full song, our song would have some kind of theme to it, some kind of story that would be telling and a purpose for why the listener would even want to hear it in the first place. And that theme we would continue to reiterate throughout the entire song to give it a certain feeling or a certain emotion. And that would be done sort of in this last 4-bar break here. And since I don't have that kind of theme or reason for this track existing, I'm just simply going to build a little melody hook. And you could imagine that melody hook being used in the beginning of the track and throughout everything, including the pre-drop. That's good. Now let's get a little bit of a melody in here. Melodies are very easy to create. What we're going to do is only use the notes of the pentatonic scale unless our chord is using one of the 2 notes that make the minor scale off of that pentatonic backbone. This is stuff that, again, I teach to my clients when we go over music theory, which is a 2-week section of my 90-day program. If you're interested in that, just, again, go to my DMs, chat me up there. I'm very chatty, love to speak, as you can tell. I never shut up. So I'm going to just grab a preset from my sample pack to make this better. I'm going to be showing you guys the sound design for the dubstep basses, don't worry. But for here, we're just going to grab my anthem lead, or you know what, I've got a signature one that's called Perfection, and this is in the free version of this sample pack that I send to people like you when you need to use sounds, and it sounds really good. We're going to use a bunch of repetition too, which is going to allow the melody to get stuck in our head more easily. But if you notice, again, I'm just using those black keys. That's just that pentatonic scale. And then I want to make sure that this lead is much flatter than everything else. And the way I'm going to do that is by, literally highlighting every single track in FL Studio here. And we're going to bring them all down. It's better to have extra headroom and turn things up in the mastering than to not have headroom and to have everything pushing into the red. Just also added this extra layer with the saw, so things sound more organized and together when we hear those saw and melody stacks later on here. And I also did this little trill thing, which is super unique on top of the chords. And that just makes it more interesting than just having. Instead, we throw in that little. Now I know what you're thinking, Aiden, these drums are really boring. They're literally just doing this exact pattern the entire track. The reason for that is because once we throw in the dubstep basses, we're going to want our drums, imagine you're a drummer, you're going to be playing and adjusting how you're drumming to what's going on in the track. So when we build out our dubstep basses and the rhythm in those basses, we're then going to be able to very easily adjust our kick drum and our snare drum to almost play kind of with and play nice with those bass sounds. All right, let's do some bass sound design, shall we? What I want is something that works similar to a drum in a marching band. I want to be able to play this bass very quickly, very aggressively, and also still hold it out and have it be long. The way we're going to do that is by having a way to adjust the articulation or the style of it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take one oscillator and I'm going to use a wavetable that is in my sample pack that I use for a lot of stuff just because it's fantastic, and it's called Weird Percussive Hit. This is basically a bunch of random drum samples that I smacked into my DAW and then exported and have been using as a wavetable just because it sounds really interesting. And we're going to adjust the wavetable position with the level, and then the actual movement or speed of this low frequency oscillator that's going to be building the sound or the movement in our bass is going to be modulated by the velocity, which means I can very easily, let me just put an O to T on this so you can hear it. This means I can very easily come into the piano roll, lay down our bass, and then as I adjust the velocity here, I'm able to very simply adjust the rhythm, whether things are playing eighth notes, quarter notes, sixteenths, etc. And I love using triplets because they allow us to have a little bit of more interesting rhythm to the ears. So I just enabled the triplet mode in Serum, which is this little knob right here that says trip. And now I can do triplets. Triplet, triplet, triplet. Now, in terms of the sound design, we need things to be loud and distorted. I'm going to find the sweet spot in our wavetable and only add a little bit of movement. This isn't... You're not able to do this with all wavetables. Some just suck, especially a lot of the default ones in Serum. But again, DM me back on Instagram for that pack. And I'm going to apply a high-pass filter with a little notch, so that little peak you see on it is going to give it sort of a vocalized noise. And I'm going to just adjust this by ear until it sounds nice and aggressive. Then I can use a notch or another peak to give it a little bit more of that vowel-y movement. Let's use another peak. Fun fact, your vowels actually are certain frequencies that as you move your mouth, you're hitting those different peaks and adjusting sort of the EQ curve of your voice. That's one of the reasons why when we listen to music, that 3,000 to 4,000 hertz range is so sensitive, because a lot of those differences in like things like E's and I's sit within that vowel range. I want this sub to be powerful, and I want that sub to slide so it resonates different parts of your body when this is played out in a club. So the sub is going to be separate, and we're going to be adjusting the pitch bend to make it quickly slide down, and then slide back up. So it's going to go... And when you play this live through a big subwoofer, we're going to feel it going down through our body and then back up through our body. And as it does so, it's going to resonate different parts of the club or our bodies, or if it's played in the car, you're going to see it resonate from like your mirrors to like the steering wheel to like the mirror up here. So this is a really cool trick that you can do in order to make your sub more interesting to the listener and almost tactile. Like we'll actually feel this. And that sub is going to just stay doing that pitch bend no matter what, except we're going to adjust its articulation, or when we hear it versus when we don't, based upon the exact same velocity that's tied to this LFO here. Time to add some OTT and some distortion to thicken it up. Especially that sub, I'm going to change it to a triangle wave, which will give us some more harmonics after the initial sine wave. Then I'm also going to add a little bit of white noise to give it some hiss, kind of like the top end of a growl. You know, if you hear a lion growl, it has a little kind of in there, that will add a little bit of that coarseness. And we're going to make sure that that's going through our filter as well. And I have a preset that literally is just this, and it's fantastic to throw over dubstep basses. For simplicity's sake, the only other thing that I'm going to add here is a little bit of reverb, and we're going to make sure that this reverb is inversely proportional to how loud the bass is, meaning when the bass is at max volume, we have no reverb, but then when it's quiet, the reverb comes in. That allows us to have nice, clean reverb on our bass. And then I'm also going to do the same sort of sweeping effect that we did on the arp. It's going to pull itself nice and wet in the mix, and then we'll just quickly snap back down. That almost pulls us in every time, which will help to create the audience's head-banging movement. Now it's just time to build out a cool rhythm. So let's listen to the track so far without the space in here and think about what rhythm would work best. I think we should go bam, bop, 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 bop. Use some triplets because I feel like people never use triplets. So I'll make us nice and unique. Bass is going to be on the 1. Make sure that bass is in key, guys, please. This is the easiest thing you can be doing. So if we listen to the articulation that now I have created here, as I throw this into the sidechain, our bass is now going to sound, let me get the kick drum and snare drum involved here. I'm going to thicken it up with a little bit more OTT. You hear that rhythm. Again, that rhythm was very, very easy to create because I've adjusted the speed of that LFO that's controlling everything, and I've had it modulate off of the velocity. So I literally just have these notes playing here, but as I move this little velocity bar, it's going to adjust the speed at which the bass is playing. Now let's do a little bit of EQ and pay attention to our bass. First of all, I want to give it a little bit of brightness. I could either increase it here, or I can use a tool like Fresh Air to add a little bit of noise with it and also increase that brightness in ways that supposedly don't hurt our ears. I also want that sub to stand out a little more, so I'm going to give it a little bit of a peak. That's definitely too much. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Now we're about 80% of the way there. Listen to what I have so far and think about what's missing. Two things. One, obviously we have a space here. That needs to be filled in. What I want to do is I want to throw in a big like, hey! So the crowd has a reason to actually respond to me when I'm DJing, opposed to me just standing there mixing like an idiot. So I'm just going to use a Cashmere sample for that. Nice and simple. And to make this sound cool, we're going to use what's known as the Haas effect. We're going to have the left and right channel play the exact same sound at the exact same volume, but we're going to delay them just slightly, and it'll create a kind of cool delayed panning effect. Make it sound a little bit wider. That needs to be turned up a bit. And then the other thing is this little melody here could be a little bit better. For example, I want to create a little bit more tension into the downbeat in the next part of the drop. So I'm going to add just that note there, which is going to create more of a leading tone into you wanting to hear the downbeat. The other thing is you'll notice that those sol stabs don't have a sub bass under them. So the bass is completely removed. This is something that a lot of artists forget to do because they are way too busy listening to things through headphones. They don't have like a good subwoofer where they're actually going to hear that bass. Luckily, I've got a preset for Super Sol Stack Bass, which kind of pitch bends down. And I can just throw that right here, deep under these chords. And as we finish nerding out here, let's go back and make that melody more interesting by doing sort of like this little grace notey stuff that I've done here. I'll sound like that. And then the final piece missing is if you look at the EQ curve, we need a little bit more stuff going on the highs. So I'm going to add what I call a hover. There's probably a better word for this. If you know what it is, please put it in the comments. So I'm using a terminology that other bass nerds are using. And this is simply going to be the exact same super saw preset used before. We're going to make it very, very detune. And we're going to make it slide up an octave and then hold itself there. You'll notice how powerful this is. This is used in hardstyle all the time. And since I've been driving the point home that dubstep is more rhythmic than it is melodic, we're going to give it a rhythmic feel by throwing a gate over it, and I can use something like raw speed for that. So before, it's just kind of one singular legato lead. And now it has a little bit of this gate and rhythm with it. And then I want this to pan around a bit, so we're going to give it a little bit of ping pong delay. And then I'm also going to just slap a little bit of reverb on it. One tip for reverb, guys, if you increase that decay nice and long, it'll make things sound more like an actual pad underneath. And then if you notice, there's all this extra noise right here, and that's going to stack up between all of our tracks. So I want to make sure to high pass everything that can be high passed. For example, our little lead here also has that extra noise that would just stack up and create extra mud. So we're going to remove that with the high pass. And these cymbal samples, I'm pretty sure I've already done this because these are from my sample pack. So yeah, I don't have to worry about that. And then this saw stab, do a little bit of post-processing, just with a little bit of distortion. And to give it some sonic cohesiveness, we'll use a little bit, just a little bit of OTT. And now just thicken and strengthen it up and allow this saw to hopefully fit better with that sub that's on it. To finish off the mixing, I'm going to throw a little bit of a pan on it that's just going to be moving randomly like this. Back and forth, left to right. You won't hear this unless you're listening with headphones or good speakers. And then the final element to fill in some space and also add a little bit of rhythm is we're going to have this little hey. We're going to make it nice and short. And then that's just going to play on the offbeats. And this is going to just sort of fade into the background and create the atmosphere of us being in a nightclub with everyone going, hey, hey, and feeling all hype. So without further ado, we're going to give this a high pass, and then our track should be about done. The way that I teach production is pretty much the most efficient way to do it, and that is done through my Loop to Launch Academy. There's a video that explains sort of how I do this production as quickly and efficiently as I do in the description here. But besides that, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, blah, blah, blah. And OneNote mastering, I have a whole process for that I save reserved for my students. So if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, then please go to my Instagram and chat me up. I love to chit-chat. Without further ado, full track in 3, 2, 1, drop.